Okay, I'm recording. One thing I wanted to point out is that the spring courses, it's too early to register for them, but they're posted, so you can start thinking about it. So, and I'll make a point to, where is it? There's the 1 credit course about helping people sort of figure out how to go and get a job. I think it was last week, I heard a story about one of our seniors from last year who was all but a shoo-in for a job and then completely blew the interview by saying something very, very stupid. And this class will hopefully prevent you from doing things like that. So, well worth it. Take it. Okay. Wednesday, pretty late. No, who's here? Okay. So there we are. Okay, so courses for next semester posted, so start thinking about that. All right. In this course, this semester, we have a test in a week, labs 1 through 7, and homeworks 1 through 3. Although homework 4 was questions from the spring's test, so that's probably worth doing. But those are the things when I say labs 1 through 7 and assignments, homework assignments 1 through 3, those are the things that are eligible for full credit until 11:59 p.m. on October 11th of this year and in this time zone. And after that, if you submit them after that, you will lose points. But homework 4 was questions from the test, so it's worthwhile doing before that, but that will still be eligible for full credit. You're going to be writing programs, or I will give you programs and you will add to them. So so there's not vocabulary, not essays, not fill in the blanks or anything like that. You'll be writing code. So that's what you should expect. You're allowed to use the code you wrote. You're allowed to use the examples I wrote. You're allowed to use things that you find on the internet. You're just not allowed to interact with another sort of live person. All right. Questions? Any questions about the test? It will be in person. So I will need, for those who can't make it, I may force you into a makeup, or I may ask for some kind of documentation about why you couldn't make it. My expectation is that it will be an in-person test. It will start at 12:30. So some people seem to have an issue getting here on time, and it will start at 12:30. So if you're a little bit late, then if you're a lot late, I'll probably try to give you some of that time back, but I don't know if I can. There's a class after this. Okay. So that was the announcement. All right. And I know for some people also have me for mobile, and those tests are Tuesday and Thursday. So I tried to give you only 2 tests in a row and not 3 tests in a row. So that's why it's Monday. All right. The material, once it starts Flask, that's the new material. So that Flask is not on the test. Flask will be on test 2. The homework this week, usually I give you a week. This I push to the 13th as the sort of nominal due date, because the 11th we have a test. but it's to watch a video, write me a few sentences. And we're learning Flask, and then there's a competitor, the Django, and this video sort of compares them. Okay. Any questions on things before I start to present new material? Okay. Some of you are behind. Some people give me the work like the day I give you a week to do things. Some people are giving them to me the day I assign them or the next day, which is perfectly fine. I'm just saying that to say that that seems to be possible for some of you, and some of you gave me hello world and nothing since. You need to sort of get in to see, if you need help, you need to get in to see me or give me some Zoom requests or something like that. If I missed your Zoom request, then Zoom request again. But some of you need to get a move on. Okay. So WTF is, I don't know what the WT is. The F is form, not something dirty. The F is form, and a form we're making Python write web pages. That's Flask, and now when you have something like you did in JavaScript class in 230, if you have places where a user of the web page can enter things, and specifically, you might not have used the term form when you were doing JavaScript, because form is often implied when you are interacting with the server side. But when you have things, text inputs and radio buttons and drop-down lists and things like that, and the user enters some information, then that's known as a form, especially when the data is being sent to some backend. So there are sort of two computers interacting. One of them is the one in front of you, and one of them is another one. Now, when we're doing this, we are sort of acting as developers. We're writing code, so we're developers. And we set up the computer in front of us to also be the server. So we are both the server and the client. But that code gets executed at different times. And then we have to say, like, okay, I've got my developer hat on, or I'm also serving as the test user, I've got my user hat on. So there are things that when you're acting as a user, you won't be able to see. Those are things that are executed on the server. So when you have things on the web page that the user can see and interact with, and then you send that information back to the server for the server to do something with, that's known as a form. And so that's what we want to start doing now. So we made pages and we put information on pages, but we haven't really interacted with the user other than maybe some navigation, sort of jumping from one page to another page. But we haven't said, okay, user, enter some information or make a choice. That's what we're going to start doing today. Okay, so I have some code. And where is my documents? 341, Flask, VEND. I'm going to paste it here. And then I'm going to open Visual Studio Code. I'm going to open the folder to the VENV. I think that happened already, but I'll go through the process anyway. File, open folder, and I'm going to, for me, documents C341, Flask, VENV, the virtual environment. Okay. And I have a bunch of stuff here now. I'm looking at 4 this time. And I have this. That is too wide. That is So that's a little better. Okay. So I say WTF. That is what we install to work with WT forms is what we install to work with forms. And the first thing we have to do is install some stuff. I thought I put in here then I should activate the DENV, but I seem to have lost that comment. So let me do that anyway. Scripts. So that is here, and the scripts is the activate, script/activate. And that gave me this little green VENV. And I don't think to run Flask things, I don't think I need to activate the VENV, but to install something, I think that's when I want to activate the VENV. And I'm going to install the Flask WTF. So pip install, and this is it's an install. It's a one thing, first time you're doing WTF. I don't think I've done it on this machine that I'm sitting at right now. So there it is. And so it should be done. Okay. Let's see if it's done by running this app, and then I'll come back and describe what we're doing, but let's just check the, so here is again, I told you I tend to run these things from the command line, and I have this $env : flask_f equals, and this time I want it to be app4. This thing out of the way. And then I want to Flask run and right click on, or sorry, control click. And it's designed to go over to, and here is some simple form, and I'm going to enter Fred, and it says hello Fred. So there was a form, a place where the user could enter some information, and then there is some kind of response or handling. I usually call this page the handler. So let's look behind the scenes. Let's look at the sort of HTML that is here. View page source. So this is the HTML, and here is that thing called a form. And there's some kind of a label, and here's an input of the text type where you type the name, and here's an input of the submit type. And then the action, they don't have any action here. The action usually tells you the sort of other page you go to. But in this, where this page came from, it's going to go back to where this page came from. Okay. So we don't have to have anything here because it's sort of not quite going back to itself, but almost going back to itself. Mark this here. Okay. So again, this is not what it will look like. This is not what we code will look like. This is what it looks like on the client side, but our code is on the server side. Okay. So let me close that. Let me stop the server, Control C. Okay. So again, our first WTF example, and I have pip installed Flask WTF. I activated the virtual environment to do that. And now I'm juggling a few things. I'm juggling forms. I'm juggling APP4. In my templates, I'm doing this, all the things that say simple. Simple layout, simple form handler. And in the static, the simple CSS. So all the things that say, the other things are from before. So I'm working with app4, forms, in my template, I'm dealing with the stuff that says simple, and in my static, I'm dealing with the thing that says simple. Okay, so let's go to the sort of APP4. Okay. Now you're dealing with going between a client and a server, and they want you to have some kind of security. And so they want you, sometimes, once in a while you can get away without it, but what you want to do is just get in the habit from the start of having it, and just always have it in all your code, and then you won't be surprised when suddenly you need it. If you get away for a few times without it, then you get really hung up, stuck when all of a sudden you need it. So it's better to have it right away. So you need this thing called a secret key, and then you make something up, and it should be some kind of quasi-random thing that nobody can guess or something like that. And I usually just make it some kind of a joke to myself, and so you can make it a joke to me, or you can tell me that you hate the stupid thing, or whatever you want to do, but do something. Okay. All right, here's the stuff we know. Boy, I thought I updated this and really posted the wrong thing. Okay. I have a default route that should redirect me to the simple form. So if it just starts up, and you sort of, now that I say it, you saw it. I started it up and it took you right to the form. If you really took notice, then the URL said simple form. So when I start the page, it usually takes me up to the root, but the root is being redirected to the simple form. There are times when you can do fancier stuff, like, has the person ever logged on before? So you can send them to like a new user page. You can ask a question. So right now, we're just, no matter what, we're redirecting. But this is back on a server side, so we can do some kind of questions. Has the person ever been here before and logged on? I'll move them on to the old user place. And if not, then I can move them on to the new user place. So right now, this is a simple redirect, but you can also involve ifs and ask questions about and redirect accordingly. Okay, here's the root that is a simple form. And forms have what's called get and post. These are methods for sending information between client and server. So we should talk about them someday, but not today. So this is just saying, on this page, I'm allowing both methods to be applicable. You can use it can be get or post, doesn't matter. I need a function to correspond to this route. And then I'm calling this thing, I'm instantiating this thing called simple form, which is in someplace else. So I've got to go figure out what that is. But let me get through app 4, and then we'll come back and say what this is. But so for right now, there's something that I must define, simple form. This route is both for the form and the page handling the form. It's doing both. So that's why there's this question in 30 that says, if the form is submitted, which means you're coming back, the user entered some information and clicked a button. If it's submitted, then we're going to get the information off the page, request.form. So there was, when the person asked for that web page in the first place, when somebody goes to your, when somebody writes in the URL for your page, then they are making a request. And then they filled in the form and they hit the button, and now they're making another request but they're also sending you some information you need to fulfill that request. And so that form information that was sent back. So this is the information coming back from the page. And I've decided to call it result. And that's going to be like a dictionary. Anything that I entered on the page will have like a key and a value. And the key will be what I said behind the scenes was the name of the thing. And the value will be whatever the user entered. And then I'm going to the handler. And I give it a title. And I give it a header. And I send those results. So if this form is submitted, if it's coming back from the user, I gather the information and I send it to the handler. Otherwise, it doesn't say else, but the way returns work, I only get here if I didn't get into the if. If this if is true, I return, I leave. And if this if is false, I come to after the if and I return another place. So the way returns work, you don't really need the else of an if, although this is effectively, it's the else of that if. But again, it's the nature of return. Return means go someplace else. Okay. So if it was submitted, I am going to the handler. If not, I'm going to the form. And I have a title and a header, and this time I have a form. So I'm either sending it like, here's the form, or here's the data from the form. So when I'm setting it up the first time, I send them the form. The second time, I send them the results from the form. This is the part that's like, you know, for now, like always the same. At some point, I'll change this question slightly, but basically there's something like this going back and forth. And this part, it might look hard today, but it becomes the easy part. It's the part that you copy, and it's the other part that is difficult. And this is just that thing at the end that I always have at the end. Okay, so that was app 4. That was a redirected default route, one other route, but that route was really disguising 2 pages, a form and a form handler. If it was submitted, I go to the form handler, otherwise I go to the form. Okay, let's go to the Python where we define the form. That's forms py. All right, let's go back to app 4 for a second. What were my imports? I'm importing from forms. So this is my thing that I made up. From forms, I'm importing simple form. And then I'm also using Flask, render the template, URL for, we use that in our, the style. And there's the request. That's getting the information. And here's the redirect. So those are the things I'm using. And now let me show you forms. So here's my forms. I'm using WTF. So I'm using a thing called FlaskForm. And then I am going to use a StringField and a SubmitField. That's what I had on my page. I had a place where they could enter a string, and I had a place where they could click a button. I define a class. I'm calling it simple form. That's my name I made up, simple form. Here's the type of thing it is, and it's inheriting from FlaskForm. That's them. So this you could change. You could call it Joe's form. This you don't change. That's theirs. A StringField is a type of thing. Here is the StringField, SubmitField, and here is my names for it. Name and enter, name, submit. Okay. So this is the button. This is the input the text type. Okay, so that's in code. That's setting up for my form in Python code. This is going to help me as a server handle what the user sends me. It's also going to help me set up the form and then handle the form after I click the button. You're supposed to be following this, be able to do it, model what I'm doing. Do you have any questions? No. Okay. What else do I have here? I have a simple form. Let me go to simple form. Simple form goes to extend simple form layout. Layout is just a common thing. So I have the doc type, I have the header, I have a place here. I'm using Jinja so I can add a title to the page. I connect to the style for the page. And I have a place for the content of the page. So this is just the common stuff where I connect to the style, then both pages will have, if I had a common header, if I had a common footer, like we did before, I would put those here. But this one I kept much simpler. So that's the layout. Here's the form. I extend the simple layout. I put the header on the page. I put the title on the page. I put the header on the page. This is the information sent from app. App sent me a title. App sent me a header. I'm going to use the simple layout. And then here's my form. And I'm using the name, and it had a label. And then, so let's see that. That was back here. So there's a label. And then the name in code. So I'm going to show the label, and then I'm going to have the actual, I'm going to use a thing of the name type, which is going to be that input of the text type. And then I have the submit, which will make a submit button. And so that gave me the page that the user enters their name on. And then I have the handler. And on the handler, again, I use the simple layout. I show the title, I show the header. And then I have in my content block, I'm sending back a result. I have a result from what the user entered, and I had a thing called name. And I'm saying hello, and then that name. So one more time, now that you've seen the pieces, let's look at it. Here is this, I just opened it up. I should be at the default route because I just opened it up, but it's already directed me to simple form. It should be popping up. Look into why this is delaying so much. There it is. And you enter a name, Carol, and click enter. And then it says, hello, Carol. Fascinating. Are we all right? So that was hello, WTF. Okay. Let's do a little bit more. Let's get a drop-down list. And then let's get some numbers and then have you do something. So now I'm going to add a select field. So in JavaScript, for just in HTML and JavaScript, a drop-down list is known as a select. Okay, so I'm extracting that stuff. I'm going to copy that, go back to the VE and V, paste over what I had. close, things open, go back. Okay. So I've added a drop down. Let's run that and prove it. I think I added 2 drop downs. Here is the same name. I'll still be Carol. Here's a drop down of computer languages I know. I know JavaScript. I pick a color, green, and I hit enter. And it said, hello, Carol. You chose JS, JavaScript. And here's the code for the color green. Hashtag 00FF00, and then there is a very bright green. Okay, so app 4 did not change. So I don't think I need this key yet. I think I'm supposed to have something on the form that refers to the key that I don't have yet. So I sort of set this half up. I have the route that's redirected. I have the simple form, which might be submitted or not, and that. No changes in app 4, no changes in the layout. Let's look at forms. Okay, I have a big comment. I'm bringing in FlaskForm. I'm bringing in StringField, which we had before, SubmitField, which we had before, SelectField, that's new. So here's the new thing I'm bringing in. Here's my simple form, which is going to be inherit from FlaskForm. I'm going to have a place for the name. I'm going to have a place for the submit. I'm going to have a select field, a drop down, then I'm going to refer to as language. I made this just a little bit too big here. So in the, I called a thing in code, I called something language. It's going to be a select field. It's going to be a drop down. I'm going to label it with the word programming language. And then here are the choices. If you remember your HTML and your JavaScript, you had what the user saw, and you had the value, which was behind the scenes. So let me, I lost my terminal. Okay. No, it didn't like Flask. Maybe I do need to be the VE and scripts. Okay. Maybe I do need to be in the VE and deactivated. Okay. So I'm going to show you the behind the scenes, view the page source. And here is a select. Here in the, this is the HTML that we were looking at. Here is a select. It has an ID of language, a name of language. The name is the attribute you usually use when you are working with a server. So they give the ID and the name the same thing. ID is usually what you use on the client side. Name is usually what you use on the server side. And then here's an option. And an option has a value. And then this is what, between open option and close option, this is what the user sees. And then this is what the user gets behind the scenes. And then there's another option. And PY is what the is what you have behind the scenes, and Python is what the user sees. Okay. So that's what we're doing here. We have these choices. Those are the options we're going to make. it is square bracket is a list. In Python, square bracket stands for list. And then it is a list of tuples. Tuples are these parenthesis things. And the tuple is, for in this particular case, the tuple has two things. And one of them is the behind the scenes thing. For it's here, the behind the scenes thing is CPP. And then there's what the user sees, the C++. Here, the behind the scenes thing is PY. And then the thing that the user sees is Python. Okay, so that's how this is the select field. This is how we set up a select, a drop-down list. And then I have one for color, and the behind the scenes thing is the hex code. And then here's what the user sees, the named color red. Okay, so that is the Python code for a drop-down. The form is easy. You just say, you made that new thing and I want it. So here's simple form. Here's the form. Here's the name label and the name. The language label and the language. The color label and the color. And that was it. And the submit. Now this is the form. We just looked at the form. I was showing you a drop-down list. You do not see the Jinja. The Jinja is a server-side thing. The Python server side, the Jinja server side. You see when we're done HTML. So you won't see this curly stuff. When I opened up the page, I showed you what was on the page. You didn't see the curly stuff. That's server side. Okay. When you open up a browser and say, show me the source code, you're acting as a user. You're looking at what the client sees. You're looking at client code. And so in this case, the client code is just HTML, but it could also be JavaScript. Okay. So that's the form. Here was a drop down. This was a drop down, and this was a drop down. Okay. What's the handler look like? So here says hello and the name. This is a Jinja comment. So again, you won't see anything like that. It might just be a blank space on the other line, but it's useful to know how to make comments, to like tell yourself things. But I was in Jinja, so I needed a Jinja comment. So I'm also in HTML, so I might have been able to make an HTML comment. Here's the result for the language. And here's me using the results here's me showing the result for the color, and here's me also using the result for the color to change the color of a div. So I've been showing you just simple displays, but you can do other things than that. You can control the style or something, not the overall style, but some sort of local style. I can change the color of something based on what the user said. Any questions? That's a drop-down list, a select. So there was a new thing in forms, a select field. There was a new thing on form using the select. You can't even tell it's a select there because this looks the same for almost all the controls. And then there's the handler. Questions? No. All right, one more, and then you have to do your thing. We're gonna allow, so the first, we had text input when they entered the name. We had a drop-down list where we were dealing with, say, text, but it was under your control. So they couldn't type anything they wanted to do. They had to choose from the list. And now we're going to have some number input. Okay. So last demo for the day. And copy this. Equal 1 and Flask and V and V and paste it over everything. Let me see at 4. Did anything change in at 4? Nothing changed in at 4. There's still a default route. There's still a secret. There's still a simple form route, which is either the handler or the simple form, blah, blah, main thing at the end. Okay. Let's go to forms. Should be something new here. I'm going to do a weekly salary calculator. And I want to know how many hours they worked and what their salary, what their wage is, how much they make an hour. Okay. So I had the string field, that was their name. I had the submit field, that was the button at the end that said submit. I had the select field, that was the drop-down list. And now we are adding this, an integer field and a decimal field. So they had a field where you're expecting an integer to come in, and they have a field where you expect to have a decimal come in. I'm going to say that the hours, I'm not going to allow anybody to work half an hour. You either work the hour or you don't. Okay. And okay, so simple form is my name. FlaskForm is what I'm inheriting from. I have a place for them to enter their name. I have the submit field. The order here doesn't matter. My submit field on my page is the last thing, but it's not, I have it here the second thing because I just made it and kept adding to it. So this order doesn't matter how it appears on the page. Here's my languages. Here's my color choices. Here's me saying, prompting them with hours. So hours is the label. And then I'm also going to call it hours. But what's in quotes here, that's the label. That's what the user will see. And then here's what I'm going to call it behind the scenes. And the same thing for wage. Hours was an integer. We're expecting whole numbers. Wage was a decimal. So you can say that you earn, I don't know, $10.50 an hour or something. Okay. All right. So what does the simple form look like? Mostly like what it looked like before. We use the layout. There's a place for the title, a place for the header that the app is sending, app 4 is sending us. We're prompting for the name. We're prompting for the language. We're prompting for the color. Here's the new part. We're prompting for the number of hours the person worked. And we're prompting for the wage that the person earns. And then there's the submit button. Okay. So far, so good. Now, I'm not just going to spit out information on the other page. I'm going to actually do a calculation. I'm going to calculate their wage, their weekly salary. I'm going to figure out their number of hours. I'm going to figure out their wage. I'm going to calculate their salary. I'm going to give them overtime. If they work more than 40 hours, I'm going to give them time and a half. So I need to ask an if. So there's going to be more, and what's on the other side is not Python, but Jinja. So I'm going to be asking my questions in Jinja. I could do some, it's possible, because the data passes through the app 4. The data passes through here on the way over to the server. So it's possible for me to do some work here. I can do the work here or in Jinja. Okay. So I could do a calculation here and then send it, and then send over here, salary equals, $450 or whatever my calculation was. So I could do calculating here. I'm going to calculate in Jinja. So I can. We've already done calculating in Python. We know how to do that. So let's see some calculating in Jinja. That is the handler. Okay. Title, header. Here's the name. I'm asking about an if on the name. An if on the name is just, did you write a name or did you not write a name? So I just say if result name. So if they enter something, I'm saying, hey there, hi there, ho there. Control click. Oh, there it is. Down there. So here that's not it. Oh, I closed everything. Very good. Sorry. Okay, so let me activate. Okay, good. Did I save? Save all. Okay, saved. Good. Let me do this again. At 4. Flask run. I think I didn't save before. Okay, here's the hours and the wage. So if I don't enter a name, it says no name. But if I enter a name, then it says, hey there, hi there, ho there. And then let's do the calculating part. If, let's say they work 30 hours at $10, and so that's under 40 hours. So that should just be a multiplication of 300. 30 hours times $10 an hour is 300. But if they worked 50 hours, then it's not a simple multiplication. For those last 10 hours, they make their wage of 10, and then they make another half of that. So for the 10 hours and exceed 40, so the last 10 hours, they make their wage of $10 an hour, which would be 100, and another 50, another time and a half. So I have an if here, whether they entered the name or not. I have an if down here, whether they worked more than 40 hours. Let's see it. And those ifs are in Jinja. So I have an asking question here, did they send me a name or not? So if they didn't send me a name, then this will be false. If they send me anything, even a space or anything like that, just initial, it will come out as true. And then I'm showing you different ways to format. So I could say, hey there, and here's the result. Or I could say, I could have some kind of a string, hi there, %s, and then have the percent and what I want to fill in there. And then here's one that should look familiar from Python. Here's ho there with open curly, close curly, dot format, and then the thing you want to fill in. So we've done this kind of styling in Python, but you can just do simple sort of concatenation, just put the result that you want sort of in place, or you can say that I want to insert it in a certain place, and there are 2 ways to do that. Okay, and here's the if structure. Here's the if, here's the else, here's the end of the if. If you're saying you want data in Jinja, it's usually curly curly. But if you're doing some kind of control, if you're doing a loop or an if or something like that, it's usually curly %. And if you want to comment, it's curly pound or curly hashtag. Here's the language, we've seen that. Here's the color, we've seen that. Here's the changing of the color of the div, we've seen that. Here's spitting out the hours. Okay, here's spitting out the wage. here's me doing some formatting to say I want 2 decimal places. And to say I want 2 decimal places, I have to sort of say, oh, by the way, that was a float. And now here's me getting the result called hours and casting it as an integer. Now I said it was an integer field. And then I said this one was a decimal field. But things that tend to come in from users on web pages, if you remember from JavaScript, tend to be thought of as strings. And then you have to cast them as the numbers that they are. And so I'm saying here I want an int, and here I want this thing to be a float. So this is sort of a bring it over to the page and make sure it's known to be an int, make sure this thing's known to be a float. And then if the hours were more than 40, then here's my calculation. I'm making a new variable S for the salary, multiplying their wage for the first 40 hours. For the hours that exceed 40, the extra hours, I'm giving them their wage times 1.5. And then I'm displaying their wage with 2 decimal places. Okay. And if they didn't work more than 40 hours, the calculation is just the hours times the wage, and I'm displaying it. The $sign is just the $sign that you see on the page because it's money. And that was mine. Questions, anything? No, nobody ever has questions. Okay, so what do you have to do? One of my favorite, like, let's get started exercises is always the restaurant calculator. So you're supposed to have a static, which should have some style. Just have to have some style. Don't make it colors that hurt my eyes. Templates, you should have a layout and 2 pages, a form and a handler. App, your app should be like mine. Form, your form should be like mine, except not exactly the same. You're going to have a place for them to enter the bill, which should be a decimal. So they're getting the bill from the restaurant. Then there'll be a drop down where you'll say, what percentage tip do you want to give? 10, 15, 20, 25, some possible, give them some possible tips, and then a page that will do the calculation. Should be easier than the salary calculator because there aren't as many ifs. All right, get one more time. Any questions for the recording? All right. Stop recording.